Mark stood at the rehearsal dinner podium and said 5 words that stopped my heart. "I can't marry you, Ivy." The room went silent. Forks froze mid-air. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Mark cleared his throat and continued like he was reading a corporate memo. "I've realized I'm in love with someone else. Someone who understands me better. Someone who makes me feel alive." He looked directly at Olivia, my maid of honor, sitting 3 seats down from me. She stared at her plate, cheeks flushed. My glass of wine trembled in my hand. 80 people watched me like I was in a car crash they couldn't look away from. My father started to stand, but I shook my head. Mark kept talking, explaining himself, justifying why he had to be honest now rather than later. Every word felt like a slap. I set down my glass, stood up slowly, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, voices erupted. My sister called my name. Someone knocked over a chair. I kept walking. Outside, the December air hit my face like cold water. The restaurant lights buzzed above me. I stood there for a long moment, breathing, waiting for tears that never came. Instead, something else settled in. Something colder. Something patient. My name is Ivy Collins. I'm 31 years old, and 3 months ago I was supposed to marry Mark Weaver in a ceremony overlooking Lake Michigan. I had picked out centerpieces. I had tasted 7 different wedding cakes. I had spent 2 years planning a future with a man who destroyed it in 5 minutes at a rehearsal dinner. But that's not the part that keeps me up at night. What keeps me awake is knowing I saw it coming and did nothing. The jokes about my work schedule. The way Olivia started showing up to our dinners uninvited. The text messages Mark would hide when I walked into rooms. I ignored every red flag because I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to believe that love was enough. It wasn't. So I left that restaurant, drove to my apartment, and sat in the dark for 3 hours. No crying. No screaming. Just thinking. Planning. Because Mark Weaver had no idea what he'd just done. He thought he was the hero of his own story, brave enough to chase true love. He had no idea he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. And I was going to make sure he understood that. Slowly. Carefully. Completely. 5 years earlier, I met Mark at a corporate design pitch. I was 26, working at Henderson Architecture, trying to prove myself in a firm dominated by men twice my age. Mark worked for Axis Development, the client reviewing our proposals. He wore a navy suit and asked the smartest questions in the room. After the meeting, he approached me in the lobby. "That sustainability angle you mentioned," he said, "that's what sold me." We went for coffee. Then dinner. Then weekend trips to Wisconsin. He was charming, ambitious, and supportive. When I landed my first major solo project, he brought champagne to my office. When his company promoted him to project director, I threw him a surprise party. We fit together like puzzle pieces. Everyone said so. Our engagement came 2 years in, on the rooftop of our apartment building. He'd set up string lights and hired a photographer. The ring was perfect. The moment was perfect. Social media exploded with congratulations. My mother cried happy tears. Everything looked flawless from the outside. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe I was so focused on the perfect picture that I missed what was happening behind the frame. The first crack appeared 6 months before the wedding. Mark started making jokes about my work ethic. "You're married to your blueprints," he'd say at dinner parties. People would laugh. I'd smile and change the subject. Then Olivia started coming around more. She was Mark's colleague, someone I'd introduced him to at a work function. She was bubbly, approachable, always available to grab drinks after meetings. Mark said she helped keep him grounded during stressful projects. I thought nothing of it. Why would I? She was my friend first. We'd met in college, stayed close through the years. When I asked her to be my maid of honor, she cried and hugged me. 3 months before the wedding, I noticed them texting constantly. Mark would laugh at his phone during movies. When I asked what was funny, he'd say, Just Olivia being Olivia. She started attending our business dinners, claiming she wanted to support me. During conversations, she'd interrupt me mid-sentence to agree with Mark's points. Once, she called my design ideas a bit cold and mechanical. Mark laughed it off. So did I. I should have paid attention. I should have seen what was building right in front of me. 2 months before the wedding, I landed the biggest opportunity of my career. Henderson Architecture was competing for the Riverside Tower project, a 40-story mixed-use development downtown. If we won, it would establish me as a serious architect in Chicago. I worked 16-hour days perfecting the proposal. Mark grew distant. He stopped asking about my progress. Instead, he'd sigh when I came home late, scroll through his phone while I talked about design challenges. One night he said, "You're going to have zero time for wedding planning if you keep this up." I promised I'd balance everything. I always did. But the comment stuck with me. It felt less like concern and more like resentment. Olivia echoed the same sentiment during lunch. "Mark just wants to feel like a priority," she said gently, touching my hand. "You're so focused on work. It's amazing, but maybe dial it back until after the wedding." I compromised. I delegated parts of the Riverside proposal to junior architects. I took afternoons off for dress fittings and venue visits. I made Mark feel like the center of my world again. And he smiled, kissed my forehead, and told me I was doing great. Meanwhile, he was falling in love with someone else. The night I found the text, I was looking for Mark's phone charger. His phone was face up on the nightstand, screen glowing with a new message. I glanced at it without thinking. The preview read, "Can't wait to finally stop pretending." The sender was Olivia. My stomach dropped. I picked up the phone, unlocked it with his passcode, the one we'd shared for years. The conversation thread went back months. Jokes about me. Plans to meet up when I was working late. Messages that blurred the line between friendship and something else. One stood out. "She'll never know. She's too busy with her blueprints to notice us." I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through months of betrayal. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed steady. I felt nothing and everything at once. I could have confronted him right then. Could have thrown his phone across the room, screamed, demanded answers. Instead, I took screenshots, emailed them to myself, and put his phone back exactly where I found it. Then I lay down in bed and stared at the ceiling until morning. Because rage burns fast and fades faster. What I needed was something colder. Something that lasted. The rehearsal dinner happened 3 days later. I knew what was coming. I'd read enough messages to understand Mark's plan. He was going to make a scene, play the honest hero, claim he couldn't live a lie. Olivia would act surprised, maybe even resist at first. They'd rehearsed it, consciously or not. So I walked into that restaurant with a smile. I hugged my parents, thanked the guests, and laughed at toasts. Mark kept glancing at me nervously, like he expected me to explode. I didn't give him the satisfaction. When he stood to make his announcement, I simply listened. Let him say the words. Let everyone see him humiliate me in front of 80 people. Let them witness who he really was. Because I knew something Mark didn't. Embarrassment fades. Reputation doesn't. When I walked out of that restaurant, I wasn't running away. I was walking toward something better. Something he'd never see coming. The pity in everyone's eyes would turn to shock. The whispers about poor Ivy would become whispers about what happened to Mark. I just had to be patient. I just had to disappear first. I didn't go home that night. I drove to a hotel downtown, checked in under a fake name, and turned off my phone. For 3 days, I stayed in that room. I ordered room service, watched silent movies, and made lists. I deleted social media. I blocked Mark's number, Olivia's number, and everyone connected to them. My family called constantly. My sister showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer. I needed silence. I needed space to think. On the fourth day, I checked out and went to my apartment. The place was exactly as I'd left it. I packed 2 suitcases, left my engagement ring on the kitchen counter, and wrote a note for my landlord. I was done with this version of my life. I withdrew money from my savings, closed joint accounts, and contacted a lawyer to handle the wedding cancellations. I didn't post explanations. Didn't send angry texts. Just erased myself from Mark's world completely. People would wonder where I went. Mark would check my social media and find nothing. Olivia would feel guilty for a week, then move on. And I would rebuild. Somewhere new. Someone new. Someone they wouldn't recognize when we met again. 6 months later, I was working under the name Ivy Morgan at Sterling Design Group, a boutique architecture firm in Minneapolis. I'd sent my portfolio to their founder, explained I was looking for a fresh start, and was hired within a week. The firm was small, hungry, and talented. I kept my head down, worked twice as hard as anyone else, and learned everything I could. My old life felt like a movie I'd watched years ago. Mark's Instagram showed him and Olivia smiling at brunches, attending galas, living the life they'd planned in secret. I didn't follow him. Didn't check obsessively. Just glanced occasionally to measure the distance between who I'd been and who I was becoming. Sterling Design specialized in sustainable commercial projects. I spent months studying renewable materials, green certifications, and urban planning. My designs got sharper. My confidence was rebuilt. By month 9, I was leading client pitches. By month 11, I'd brought in 3 major contracts. The firm's founder, Mr. Sterling, pulled me aside one afternoon. "You've got something special," he said. "Whatever happened before this, it made you better." He had no idea how right he was. 1 year after the rehearsal dinner, Sterling Design Group was invited to pitch for the Greenway District redevelopment in Chicago. A massive urban renewal project. 20 blocks. Mixed residential and commercial space. Sustainability requirements. The exact kind of project I dreamed about at Henderson Architecture. The exact kind of project Mark's company, Axis Development, was desperately trying to win. I read the RFP 3 times, studied every requirement, and smiled. This was it. This was the moment I'd been building toward. I told Mr. Sterling I had personal history in Chicago but could handle it professionally. He trusted me. We assembled a team, developed a proposal focused on green infrastructure and community engagement. I worked 16-hour days again, but this time for myself. Not for approval. Not to prove anything to Mark. Just because I was good at this and I wanted to win. 2 weeks before the pitch, I saw Henderson Architecture had also submitted a proposal. My old firm. The place that taught me everything. They were competing too. 3 firms. 1 contract. Winner takes all. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The pitch presentation was scheduled at City Hall, 3rd floor conference room. I arrived early, set up our materials, and watched the other teams filter in. Henderson Architecture came first. I recognized faces from my old life. They didn't recognize me. Different hair, different glasses, different names on the roster. Then Mark walked in with the Axis Development team. He looked older, tired. Olivia was with him, carrying a tablet, playing the role of supportive colleague. She'd left her previous job to work directly under Mark. Convenient. Mark scanned the room and froze when his eyes landed on me. I watched the recognition hit him. Confusion. Shock. Then something else, fear maybe. I smiled politely, like we were strangers, and turned back to my notes. He whispered something to Olivia. She looked over, squinted, then shook her head like she couldn't believe it. I could feel their eyes on me throughout the presentations. Henderson went first, solid proposal but traditional. Axis went second. Mark stumbled through slides, clearly distracted. Olivia tried to recover with enthusiasm, but the cracks showed. Then Sterling Design presented. I led the pitch. Spoke clearly, confidently, passionately. Presented renderings that highlighted sustainability, community impact, and long-term economic benefits. When I finished, the room was silent. Then applause. After the presentation, Mark cornered me in the hallway. "Ivy." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't know you were in Minneapolis." I gathered my materials slowly. "It's a good city. Why didn't you tell anyone where you went?" "Your family was worried sick." I looked at him directly. "I needed space." "You understand space, right? You needed space to be honest about your feelings." He flinched. "I didn't mean for it to happen that way. The rehearsal dinner, you just humiliated me in front of 80 people," I said calmly. "But that's old news. I'm over it." "Are you?" Olivia appeared behind him, arms crossed. "This feels personal, Ivy. Competing for the same contract." I smiled at her. "It's business, Olivia. Nothing personal. Though I have to say, using my old design concepts in your proposal was bold." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out a folder from my bag, handed it to Mark. Inside were side-by-side comparisons of designs I'd created at Henderson and renderings in Axis's proposal. Nearly identical layouts. Same structural concepts. Different colors. Mark stared at the papers. "Where did you get these?" "Professional curiosity," I said. Then I walked away, leaving them both standing in that hallway, speechless. 2 weeks later, the city announced their decision. Sterling Design Group won the Greenway District contract. The email came at 9 in the morning. Mr. Sterling called me into his office, grinning. "We did it, Ivy. This is the biggest project in the firm's history." I kept my reaction measured, professional. "It's a team effort. Don't be modest. Your proposal was flawless. The city officials specifically mentioned your sustainability approach." That afternoon, I allowed myself a moment. I sat in my apartment, looked out at the Minneapolis skyline, and felt something close to peace. Not happiness. Not revenge satisfaction. Just quiet certainty that I'd proven something to myself. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the win. You earned it. Mark." I deleted it without responding. The next morning, industry blogs started reporting the story. Axis Development loses major contract amid plagiarism allegations. Someone had leaked the design comparisons I'd shown Mark. Not me. Maybe a City Hall insider. Maybe someone from Henderson who recognized their old concepts. Either way, the damage was done. By noon, Axis's stock had dropped 4%. By evening, Olivia had resigned, citing personal reasons, in a vague statement posted online. 3 months later, Axis Development was under formal investigation. Turns out the plagiarism went deeper than I'd realized. Olivia had been copying designs from multiple sources for years, passing them off as original work. Mark had either known and ignored it, or been too distracted to notice. Either way, he was responsible. Clients started pulling contracts. Investors demanded answers. The company that Mark had built his career on was crumbling. I watched from a distance, not celebrating, just observing. Meanwhile, Sterling Design was thriving. We hired 10 new architects, opened a second office, and I was promoted to senior partner. My name appeared in Chicago Design magazine, the architect who rose from the ashes. The article didn't mention Mark by name, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines. My family reached out. My mother called. My sister sent emails. They wanted to know where I'd been, how I was doing, if I was okay. I responded carefully, gave them just enough to ease their worry but not enough to reopen old wounds. My father sent a simple text. "Proud of you." That one made me pause. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear it. 6 months after the Greenway win, I flew back to Chicago for a design conference. The keynote speaker had cancelled, and the organizers asked if I'd step in. I said yes. The conference was held downtown, at the same hotel where Mark and I had celebrated our engagement years ago. I walked through those halls feeling like a different person. The keynote was scheduled for Saturday morning. I spent Friday preparing my speech, focusing on integrity in architecture, the importance of original work, and rebuilding after failure. I didn't mention Mark. I didn't need to. The message would be clear enough. Saturday morning, I stood backstage watching the auditorium fill. 500 people. Industry professionals, students, competitors. I spotted familiar faces from Henderson Architecture. Then I saw Mark. He sat in the back row, partially hidden, but I recognized the slump of his shoulders, the way he hunched forward. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Olivia wasn't with him. I'd heard she'd moved to Portland, working at a small firm under a different name, trying to rebuild like I had. Except she was running from shame. I was running toward something better. The moderator introduced me. I walked on stage to applause. I spoke for 40 minutes about resilience, about learning from mistakes, about building a career on honesty rather than shortcuts. The audience was engaged, nodding, taking notes. I talked about the Greenway project, the sustainability challenges we'd solved, the community partnerships we'd built. Near the end, I shifted to a more personal story. 3 years ago, I said, I was at the lowest point of my career. I'd worked for years building towards something that fell apart in one night. I had two choices: let that moment define me, or use it as fuel. I paused, scanning the crowd. My eyes found Mark in the back row. He was staring at me, motionless. I chose fuel, I continued. I chose to become the person I was meant to be, not the person someone else expected me to be. And that decision changed everything. The audience erupted in applause. I smiled, soaking it in. Not because I needed validation, but because I'd earned it. After the speech, people swarmed me with questions, business cards, and job offers. I answered patiently, shook hands, and posed for photos. Mark didn't approach. He slipped out before the crowd cleared. I watched him go, feeling nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just closure. That evening, I had dinner with my family. My mother, father, and sister met me at a restaurant overlooking the lake. My sister hugged me tight. I'm so glad you're okay. We were so worried. I'm better than okay, I said. My father studied me across the table. You've changed. I grew up. My mother reached for my hand. We saw Mark at the conference. He looked terrible. I sipped my water. That's not my concern anymore. Do you regret it? My sister asked. Walking away without a fight? I thought about it. I really thought about it. No. Fighting would have kept me tied to him. I needed to let go completely to become this. My father nodded slowly. Your mother and I blamed ourselves for a while. Thought we'd raised you to be too forgiving. You raised me to be strong, I said. It just took me a while to figure out what strength actually looks like. We talked through dinner about safer topics. My work, their lives, upcoming holidays. But I could see the pride in their eyes. No pity. Not concerned. Just genuine respect for who I'd become. On the drive back to my hotel, I passed the street where Mark and I used to live. The apartment building looked the same. But I felt nothing looking at it. Just a place I used to know. 2 months later, I got a call from Mr. Sterling. You're not going to believe this, he said. Henderson Architecture wants to partner with us on a new project. I set down my coffee. Henderson? My old firm. They reached out directly. Said they want to collaborate on the Northside Cultural Center. It's a big deal, Ivy. Huge publicity. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Henderson was where I'd started, where I'd learned everything. Going back felt like closing a circle. What do you think? Mr. Sterling asked. I think we should do it. The partnership kicked off 3 weeks later. I flew back to Chicago for the initial meetings. Walking into Henderson's office felt surreal. Same layout, same conference rooms, but I was different now. The lead architect, Mr. Patterson, greeted me warmly. "Ivy, it's good to see you again. We've been following your work at Sterling. Impressive." "Thank you. I learned from the best here." We spent the day outlining project goals, dividing responsibilities, and building timelines. Professional, collaborative, productive. At lunch, Mr. Patterson pulled me aside. "I heard what happened to Mark. I'm sorry we didn't support you more during that time." I nodded. I wasn't ready for support then. I needed space to figure things out myself. The Northside Cultural Center project became my new obsession. It was challenging, creative, and meaningful. Sterling and Henderson worked seamlessly together, combining resources and expertise. I split my time between Minneapolis and Chicago, overseeing design teams in both cities. During one Chicago visit, I ran into someone unexpected. I was grabbing coffee near my old apartment when I saw Olivia. She looked different, shorter hair, no makeup, dressed simply. She saw me at the same moment. We froze. Then she walked over slowly. "Ivy." "Hi." "Olivia." We stood in awkward silence. "I know I don't deserve your time," she said quietly. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I studied her face. She looked tired, older. "Are you apologizing because you're sorry, or because your career fell apart?" She winced. "Both, honestly. What I did was wrong. I convinced myself it was just attraction, just feelings, but I hurt you deliberately. I knew what I was doing." "Yes, you did. For what it's worth, Mark and I didn't last. We broke up 4 months after the rehearsal dinner. Turns out guilt isn't a great foundation for a relationship." I felt nothing after hearing that. No satisfaction, no sympathy. "I hope you've learned something from all this." "I have," she said. "I'm trying to rebuild. Start over somewhere new. Good luck with that." I walked away, and didn't look back. 1 year after the keynote speech, Sterling Design Group opened a Chicago office. I moved back to my home city, not as someone running away but as someone returning victorious. The new office was in a renovated warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and natural light. We hired local talent, partnered with community organizations, and established ourselves as leaders in sustainable design. The Greenway District project was nearing completion. The Northside Cultural Center was in construction. My calendar was full of consultations, site visits, and speaking engagements. I bought a condo overlooking the river, and decorated it exactly how I wanted. Modern, minimal, mine. No compromises. No shared decisions. Just my space. My father visited one weekend, helped me hang artwork. "You've built a good life here," he said, stepping back to admire a painting. "I've built my life," I corrected gently. He smiled. "Even better." That evening, we had dinner on my balcony. The city lights glowed below us. "What do you think about him?" my father asked. I knew who he meant. Sometimes. But not the way you'd think. I don't miss him. I just remember who I was with him and feel grateful I'm not that person anymore. Who are you now? I thought about it. Someone who doesn't need anyone's permission to be successful. Someone who doesn't compromise her ambitions for someone else's comfort. Someone who knows her worth. My father raised his glass. To know your worth. We clinked glasses as the sun set over Chicago. 2 years after the rehearsal dinner, Forbes published a feature on emerging architects under 40. I was on the cover. The article detailed my career trajectory, the projects I'd led, the firm I'd helped grow. It mentioned the Greenway District as a landmark achievement in sustainable urban design. The article briefly referenced a personal setback that became a professional catalyst, but didn't name Mark. I didn't need to. The industry knew. The publication generated speaking invitations from 3 universities, consulting offers from major firms, and a book deal to write about sustainable architecture. I accepted the speaking engagements, considered the consulting offers, and declined the book deal. I wasn't ready to tell that story yet. Maybe someday. The morning the Forbes issue was released, my phone exploded with congratulations. Colleagues, former professors, old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. My mother called crying happy tears. My sister sent a photo of herself holding the magazine in a bookstore. And buried in the messages was one from Mark. Congratulations on everything you've achieved. You deserved better than what I did. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I blocked his number without responding. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges stay burned. And that's okay. 3 years after walking out of that rehearsal dinner, I stood in Greenway District watching families explore the newly opened community park. Children played on sustainable playground equipment. Adults browsed the farmers' market. Small businesses thrived in the ground floor retail spaces. This was what I'd envisioned. What I'd fought for. What I'd built. Mr. Sterling stood beside me. How does it feel? Like closure, I said. Good closure. He nodded. You've taken this firm places I never imagined. I'm grateful. It's been mutual. We walked through the district, greeting residents, taking photos, answering questions from reporters covering the opening. This was the part one loved most. Seeing designs come to life, watching communities use spaces I'd created. Late afternoon, I sat alone on a bench overlooking the river. The water flowed steadily, indifferent to human drama. I thought about Mark and Olivia, wherever they were now. Thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, standing outside that restaurant in December, frozen and humiliated. I wouldn't go back and change anything. Every painful moment had led here. Every choice, every sacrifice, every quiet morning rebuilding myself had created this life. I pulled out my phone and texted my sister. Thanks for believing in me when I disappeared. She responded immediately. Always. Coffee tomorrow. Absolutely. I smiled, stood up, and walked toward my car as the sun set over the city I'd reclaimed. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at the same venue where Mark had announced our breakup. The restaurant had been converted into an event space, and they were hosting a design industry gala. The irony wasn't lost on me. I accepted the invitation. The night of the gala, I wore a navy dress and arrived alone. The space looked different now. Higher ceilings, better lighting, modern decor. But I remembered exactly where I'd been sitting that night. The table near the window. 3rd seat from the left. I was scheduled to present an award for emerging talent in architecture. Before my turn, I mingled, networked, laughed at industry jokes. Several people approached to congratulate me on recent projects. I felt comfortable, confident, present. When they called my name to the stage, I walked up calmly, looked out at the audience of 200 professionals. 3 years ago, I began. I was at a dinner in this exact space. That night changed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. People leaned forward, curious. I learned that sometimes the worst moments create the best opportunities. That failure isn't final. That you can rebuild yourself into someone stronger, smarter, more capable than you ever thought possible. I paused, scanning the faces. So to anyone here feeling stuck, feeling like they've lost their chance, feeling like they'll never recover from a setback, you will. Not because someone saves you. Because you save yourself. The applause was thunderous. After the gala, I drove to my old neighborhood, parked across from the apartment where Mark and I had lived together. The lights were on. A different couple lived there now. I watched for a moment, not with sadness but with perspective. That version of my life belonged to someone else. A younger Ivy who'd needed validation, who'd compromised her dreams, who'd made herself smaller to fit someone else's vision. I wasn't her anymore. I started the engine and drove to my condo. Inside, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. The city stretched before me, full of projects I'd designed, buildings I'd influenced, communities I'd helped shape. My phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Sterling. Dinner next week? I want to discuss making you a named partner. I smiled and responded, absolutely. Thank you. Named partner at 34. Leading major urban projects. Speaking at international conferences. Mentoring young architects. This was the life I'd built from the ruins of that rehearsal dinner. This was what happened when you stopped waiting for permission and started creating your own opportunities. I thought about Mark one last time. Wondered if he ever understood what he'd lost. Then I decided it didn't matter. His opinion had stopped mattering the moment I walked out of that restaurant 3 years ago. 4 years after the rehearsal dinner, I stood on a stage in Vancouver delivering a TED Talk. The topic, rebuilding after betrayal, finding strength in starting over. I told my story, carefully edited but honest. Talked about the public humiliation, the decision to disappear, the slow process of rebuilding in a new city. I discussed the importance of controlling your narrative, of choosing growth over bitterness, of turning pain into purpose. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. When I finished, I said, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so completely yourself that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant. It's not about making them regret losing you. It's about making yourself grateful they did. Standing ovation. Cameras flashing. My heart is full but steady. Backstage, my mother waited with tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you, baby. Thanks, Mom. Do you think Mark saw this? I thought about it. Probably. The talk would be online within days. But his opinion no longer mattered. I hope he did, I said finally. Not because I want him to feel bad. Because I want him to see what I became without him. That night, I flew back to Chicago. My city. My home. My life. The next morning, I went to the Sterling design office and got to work on the next project. Because this was never about Mark. It was always about me.